Hi, it is noon on Wednesday, uh, 3 o'clock Eastern, noon Pacific, and whatever time it is where you live. And I'm Janet Fitch, so that means this must be Writing Wednesday, where I answer your writing questions, your existential questions, philosophical questions, craft questions, um, just about anything writing. Um, and you can today you can talk to me through the chat, and I'm happy to. We'll go back and forth. Hi, Laura. And if you have questions for me in between Writing Wednesdays, which is most of the time, you can write to me through my website, janetfitchwrites.com, and I can make a Writing Wednesday around your question. So, and please, if you want to support my efforts to do this, if you can subscribe at the bottom page, that's really useful to me. Hi, Buzena, good to see you. Hi, Sarah. Um, so somebody has sent me a question for today, and I thought I would. So this is Demi V. Demi, if you're on the if you're on today, I'm doing your question. And just please send me questions. I love it. So I just got back from an vacation for birthday. I always try to get out of town. And so this was very fun. I, it's always good on special days to contemplate, where you were this time last year and kind of what's been the theme or the vibe of the year. But this year I'm thinking more ahead than behind, thinking what I want, how do I want the next phase to look. So that's been very interesting. Writing is definitely a part of it, and teaching is still a part of it. So I'm sure you're worried about that. But in any case, thank you, Bozena. Appreciate the good wishes. Um, so here's the question. It was, um, what would your advice be if I have a general idea and I know how my story is going to start, continue, and end, but don't have any specific scenes? So, like, not enough material to start the first draft. I keep getting stuck at this stage. So this is a wonderful question because everybody has to start. How do you start a novel? This person has a general idea of what their book is going to be about. Um, they know how, they know where it's going to start. They know how it's going to continue, and they know the end, but they don't have any scenes. Now, this is how I would say 95% of all writers start a book. Uh, if they have that much, I think, Demi, I think you're oversensitive. Not, oh, you can't be oversensitive. We're writers and we're sensitive, that's why you have questions. But I think that you're over preoccupied by advanced planning. I think that the process of writing is the process of discovering your book. And the fact that you don't know everything about it that's writing. That's, it's not just par for the course. It is across the board the way it usually goes. Um, unless you're writing genre, um, uh, you are rarely plotting out the entire thing ahead of time. I mean, some people do. Mystery writers do because often the plot is it's a very delicate mechanism, and they have to work out the pieces. They can't just see where it goes. They, it's a little, I don't mean that mystery writing is mechanical, but it means that uh, it's a it's intricate, and they normally do plot out ahead of time. But most writers of fiction, commercial fiction, literary fiction, most kinds of fiction, have do not even have as much as you have. They don't. They know generally. They know something. It could be the start of the book. It could be the climax. They know, like the exciting climax of the story, that where all forces come together, and they can picture that really clearly, but they probably don't know how you got there, how they were going to get there, or how it ends. Sometimes people know the ending but don't know much ahead of that. It's absolutely normal to not know, and not have any scenes. I don't have scenes until I write them. I mean, I don't know what's going to happen. I had started writing um, the Revolution of Marina M as a poem, uh, as a novel in verse, and I got to a certain place in the novel where I didn't know what was going to happen in the scene. I didn't know how the scene would turn out, and I couldn't do it from in verse because I didn't have an advanced knowledge of how the scene would play out. I needed to use all my skills as a fiction writer in prose to come into a room with people and have them interact and see, have them put pressure on each other, because that's what a scene does, that's what dialogue does. They put pressure on each other, and something happens where they can't go back to the way it was before. So until I got into the scene, I have I had no idea what would happen, um, and so I couldn't continue the book because I didn't know. I had to switch back out of the verse into, you to use all of my tools, and and um, then I could uh, discover that scene. So I have a couple of questions about this here. Cedric's mom. Happy belated birthday, Miss Janet. Long time no see. Yeah, I haven't seen you for a long time. Can you please mention again the name of the movie for The Method? I had a short story that became a feature film called The Long Game with Kathleen Turner and Jackie Earle Haley and Sakai Abeni. So it's out on streaming. I think you can get it on Apple TV or one of the streaming things. And so Sarah Leslie says, I'm well into my draft and have lots of scenes, but don't know my ending yet. There seem to be as many places and ways to be stuck as there are writers. Oh, of course, there are, and we have to face that. We just have to face it. Uh, the first question of what do you do? She has the beginning, the start, some things in the middle, ideas about things in the middle, and then some idea of how it will end. Um, so how do I begin? Is really this is She says that I keep getting stuck at this stage, which means she's tried this before, and it's a stumbling block. Well, first, if you have the start, really important. You know where you start. Um, and that might change. Sometimes you actually don't start where you think you're going to start. Everything is going to be fluid. So if you're afraid to commit yourself to the beginning, don't worry about it because you're going to change it almost 100%. you're going to change the beginning. Once you've finished, you'll go back to the beginning and see, then you'll see the shape. If you end in a certain way, you'll go back and look at that beginning and say, am I presaging, am I setting up what happens at the end? Or am I kind of still in left field? Then you go back and you pull the beginning into line so that you make a doorway, and then it goes to wherever you end up. Um, so how do you begin? Uh, People get stuck at putting the words down, like they do a lot of daydreaming, they do a lot of picturing in their head. Picturing in your head, writing in your head is not a good place to be doing your writing. Writing on the page is much better because then you actually see what's there and not this sort of nebulous daydream. You just get something down and then you look at it and it's like, well, that's not very good. That's where people talk about having a shitty first draft. Yeah, but you've gotten it down. It's a real thing. Until it's on the page, you don't have anything. Um, so you start somewhere. I like to start by showing the spring being wound up. Like what forces are in play and what characters are getting ready to make their move. Um, I have a character who's really wound up, and then I put them in a situation that's going to punch their buttons. Then I have a pressure point there. That that first chapter, those scenes, put pressure on the characters already wound up in a certain way, and when those forces come to bear, something is going to happen. There's energy being packed into those first scenes. So you have here's a stupid example, but a real obvious one is like, you have the feckless Southern belle, who is just arguing with everybody. And, if a bow is tied the wrong way, that is a real problem for her. She's very, belle of the ball, vivacious, rich, daddy's girl, all of this stuff, and everything has to be exactly her way. And then the rumble of civil war. Well, that's a situation that's going to put pressure on that girl in a unmistakable way. Um, you know, each book I've written, you pick a character who has a problem, maybe things that are misaligned inside themselves or ambitions that are ridiculous or aren't going to happen. And you put them in a situation that is going to press on those traits. That's a good place to start. I always like to start to show the character before the action begins. So, situation antebellum, before the war, antebellum. In White Oleander, I have Astrid and her mother. So you see what their lives are like and who they are. And then circumstance put pressure on those people, especially the mother, who is headed for some kind of disaster. You can feel it. In the second one, a girl is worried about her boyfriend. She's worried about their relationship. Pressure on her. We see who she is, what her life is like, and then she gets a phone call saying that something has happened to him. So it's a setup. So in the Russian novels, it's a intellectual girl, a romantic poet with dreams of glory and political leanings, to the left, and there is the rumble of, it's like we're in the World War I, but the rumble of revolution is being heard, and we can see the forces coming together here. Um, so that's always a good place to start. Bozena says it's such a shame so much of the process takes place in the head, only there. Try to do the process on the page. Try to do your thinking on the page and not do your thinking and then write the results. Really try to do your groping right on the page. Because otherwise it's not really real. It's still very amorphous. You have to at some point declare yourself to the page and get something, get a scene. And then, like, how do I show this? You get a scene. And you continue to have that problem, or that continues to be the modus operandi of writing, is you have an idea of what that scene is going to be, or at least the beginning of it. And then you put your character through it and yourself through it, and you find out things. You find out, oh, that's a dud. That doesn't go anywhere. Or, oh, that character needs to be a little stronger. That character is too weak to stand up to situation. Or that character is too strong, and there's not going to be a story if they're that strong. They need to struggle more. You find out about your character by writing the scenes, not by thinking about them and then writing. That's not how it works. So try to have as little taking place in your head as possible. When you go away from the computer, don't even think about your book. Think about it when you sit down and you're working. You never become inspired until you're working. The muse favors the working writer. I think that if I can recommend anything, it's like cut that daydreaming out. Whatever, and I'm just one person, but if you're watching this, you're coming to find out kind of my approach to this. And my approach to this is cut the daydreaming and really do it on the page. So this person has a start, which means, they know, Susie is a senior in high school, and she's being harassed by her brother's friend. Well, so you start with Susie and what she's like, and then introduce the brother's friend. And how is he going to harass her? How does he do it? Is he sly? Is he overt? Is he how does the brother feel? Does the brother know, and how does he feel about it? Is she outraged, or does she cover her feelings and try to pretend nothing's happening? Then you start working with the character. You get the clay and you start working the clay. How does this character react? Is there an interaction? Is she going to win the first round? Maybe she gets rid of him for a while and then back he comes later. Sarah Leslie says, did any of your characters' personalities in the Russian novels change significantly over the course of writing, or did you have them from the jump? The characters' relationship deepens as they interact. I learned a tremendous amount about them, especially the main character, Marina Makarova. She starts out as a really high-spirited girl, and she transgresses, as people do, and then has repercussions. She causes things to happen that she doesn't really necessarily intend. So there's a lot of questions about being what's right, what's moral, what do you want, desire, um, sometimes gets in there. Somebody is, they know what's moral, but they know what they want. And how strong is that urge to have what you want, versus what you know is right? Uh, Interesting forces come to play. So I never know my characters. They always change significantly, especially your protagonist will change significantly over the course of a novel. That's kind of the definition of a protagonist, is that they're the character who changes. Everybody else cannot change, but in the Russian novels, most of the people do change over time. They endure tremendous hardships and have to make terrible decisions, terrible um, choices, and they all change, um, except for one who's just gets crazier and crazier. But he's latent. Who he is unfolds and unfolds and unfolds as the forces around him are allow him to be that way. That's the There are several villains, and that's probably the most villainous villain. Um, so yeah, the personalities do change over time, and that's what you can't daydream about. You put them through their paces, and then you the accumulated knowledge that they have changes them drastically. In Marina M, and Chimes of Lost Cathedral, there is one of the girls, her, in her student days, there's three friends, and one of them is kind of a fanatic in the making, and becomes that fanatic, but has all kinds of interactions with my character, um, who is a very different kind of girl and isn't going to get on the bus the way her friend thinks. And her friend becomes more and more extreme and involved in the politics of the time. It starts doing really bad things, out of idealism. And the other one is the good girl who is just the A student and is worried about her grades and worried about her grades. Um, and she turns out to be a real hard case. Angry at my character, at the protagonist, for being more of a free spirit. Like, many good girls are really angry people because they see other people living out um, their adventures and romances and whatever, and it's like, I'm working so hard. How come they have all the fun? Well, that's right. And you get some really nasty people come out of that resentment, as we're seeing right now. If you look at the tech bros, and where they get their nasty personalities, it's looking at other people who've had good, interesting, fun lives and friendships and romance, and they've been doing is coding and being turned down by the girls they're interested in, and now they're making everybody pay for it. I mean, that's real. That's happening. Um, so Bozena says, how could they not change significantly, the characters, under those circumstances? Yeah, that's right. Um, so um, in the idea that you don't have enough to start a first draft, if you know who your character, the protagonist is, basically the situation that at least begins the book, and where you're going with it roughly, like what the territory is. Are you, Utah, or are you Maine? Are you Mozambique? Basically the territory. So in the first book, I knew that it would be, I didn't even know she was going to be in foster care. I knew it was a daughter of a really attractive, really strange, intransigent woman. I didn't even, who uh, murder, and then I knew that there would be, I didn't even know it was gonna be a murder at first, but I knew it was a poisoning. I knew somebody was gonna, it was a love revenge story, but I had this daughter, and I knew that she admired the mother, but something, the mother was losing her grip. So I knew the beginning of that. Had no idea where it would go at all. The second book, I knew the climax. I knew it was going to be about a suicide. It was going to be about survivors after a suicide. Um, and it was basically going to be about the mother of the, about a girl who's sort of a ragamuffin, street kid, and her more elegant boyfriend who has committed suicide, and the boy's mother who hates this girl and imagines that she was responsible for the boy's death. And I just knew that there would be a moment where the girl and the mother are in the mother's house together, and the mother would start talking to her as if she were the boy, the dead boy. And there was going to be this transference between the son and the son's girlfriend. And the girlfriend, because being kind of a, coming from a very underprivileged family and suddenly being treated as family by this woman, begins to take on some of the traits of the son, and a very kind of gothic relationship. I knew that that climax was gonna, that was gonna be the climax of the book. So then you start asking yourself questions. If the climax of the book, but you don't know how you got there, or if you know the end and you don't know how you get there, you start asking yourself questions. So I asked myself, how did this girl get there? How did the girl and the boy ever even meet? Because class wise, they just were in different worlds. Um, and so I had them be an art model and an artist, and somebody who left university and then is taking classes as an artist. And that's how they met. Um, and then it's like, who are they? Originally I had the girl as being very soft, very vulnerable, very delicate. Um, and as I went along, I realized, no, if she's up against this woman, his mother, if she's going to take her on and survive it, she needs to be a little stronger than that, and then a little stronger than that, so that there's really a good interaction, and making her the punk rock princess. I knew people like that, but it gave her a little bit more muscle to deal with the antagonist. The dance between the antagonist and the protagonist is very interesting, in that if Demi, if you have if you know who your protagonist and you know who your antagonist is, you're saying that the start and the middle and the end, um, then it's ref- as you write scenes of the conflict, you'll see if the level of strength of each one of them, because your protagonist always needs to be a little weaker than your antagonist, uh, or there's no pressure. The antagonist is always a little stronger than the protagonist. So the protagonist has to grow into a person who can meet the obstacles. Um, and we want to see that. Um, so we build our, um, there, there are many videos on here about what is a scene and building a scene. Scenes are the building blocks of your fiction. It's not a story that you're telling somebody on the phone. It's uh, real time scenes where you got your character in real time. You use exposition to get them into the scene, but the scene is an interaction with another person that then has an outcome. And the outcome is the engine that fuels the next scene. So you can think of it, if anybody studied history, you can think of it as, Hegelian terms. It's the, the thesis, antithesis, synthesis. So two things work themselves out, and then the thing that worked itself out becomes the new thesis. And then there's another synthesis, and you move along. So the outcome of that scene propels you into the next scene. So you don't know. Say you have the sister and the brother's friend, who is the creepy guy who keeps bothering her. Um, until you're in that scene, you don't know how they're going to react to one another. You might find that it's interrupted. You might find the brother taking the friend's side. So he's being dragged into it. You might have an increasing feeling of injustice, of insecurity. And then where do you want to show that? Do you want to be at school? Do you want to be at the school play? And this is somebody who's on the play with her. You just ask yourself a lot of questions. What is this girl? You do a 3D character study. What does she do for fun? So say she likes to do archery. So she's on the, does archery after school. So maybe this person follows her after her archery practice. And she would, you know, wonder maybe, is this a target? Am I a target? You shoot high, you get your metaphors from this kind of activity. But it'll give you an idea of like setting, where to set it. And you can see, is she going to run away in tears? Is she going to pretend like she, doesn't care? Is she going to threaten him back? Is she going to, uh, imagine herself as, what was the huntress Artemis? And give us metaphor of the Artemis thing, story, the myth of Artemis, where she turns the harasser into a deer and then chases him down. Greek mythology is wonderful for things like that. So yeah, don't hesitate to jump in. You can always, if you don't like, if it doesn't, nothing turns out, it just is no good, then you throw it away. You say, oh, then I've tried it and that didn't work. I'm going to try something else. But if you're just daydreaming you're never going to get to the next scene and the next scene. It's not going to push you along the way an actual realized scene will. GB, hi GB. Did you know her before you started, or did she also become developed as you wrote? Know her. How well defined was the antagonist in the second book? That's the mother. I knew that the mother's father had committed suicide as well, because suicide is something that runs in a family, not genetically, but the trauma runs in the family. So I figured, I knew that the mother was an elegant woman. I knew she was a pianist, a concert pianist, an important pianist. I knew that her father was a composer, and had come out of Vienna um, ahead of the Nazis. Um, and I knew that her father was a suicide. So that I knew about her. And then it's like, okay, her relationship with her son, I did know that it was going to be like a family romance, that the mother and son bond was kind of creepy. I knew that that was going to be the case. But until I saw it played out, I didn't know. There was so much I didn't know. I had to think about it. I had to interview people who were concert pianists, which I did, and found out all kinds of stuff. I found out that people who take a profession very, very young, like like a musician, especially concert pianist, they start at 3, they start at 4. I mean, you can't start at 10 and decide you're going to, maybe you can, but many of these people started very, very young, before they were even playing in the sand. They didn't play in the sandbox. They never got hit in the head with a shovel by another kid. They never went to school. A lot of them didn't go to school. So they know very little about a lot. There's a lot of stuff that these people don't know anything about. They've never lived a normal life. They've never gone to the supermarket. They never cooked for themselves. They never were in class. They were never in clubs. They never went to camp, except music camp. Um, so they're very odd human beings. Ballet people who become major dancers often have that lack of childhood. They have a lack of what it is just to be a regular person. They don't have that, which makes them very interesting as characters. Kid actors, they don't have the same, they didn't live the same lives we lived. They didn't go to school. They didn't necessarily, and they might have gone to, school on the set or something, but, they don't have the same life experiences. They're almost crippled in a certain way. Uh, so I learned that about my character's mother. Um, I learned that she spoke German growing up, um, and that she's different in German than in English. And I know people who are bilingual, and if you only know them in one language, and then you're with them when they start speaking the second language, it's like they're somewhat different person in the other language. So there's that as well, and the effect of having been raised that way. You see a different side of her. So yeah, there were many, many things that I learned about the antagonist in Painted Black that I wouldn't have known before. Um, let's see. GB says, have to laugh. Sounds like so many of my classmates from film school at Cal Arts in SUNY, New York. Cedric's mom, fascinating. GB Walter, rich kids who never had to work a real job. Their stories are based on endless TV shows and movies. Yeah, they're not like you and me. They didn't babysit and mow the lawn and make dinner before mom got home and scrabble for that summer job. Doing something either very menial or something you don't even know how to do, but you talk your way in because you want the money. Uh, uh, I don't know if anybody else did that, but um, so you think about it, plot comes from character. So much of it has to do with character work and figuring out who that person is in the scene, especially your protagonist. And usually you get your protagonist last. You're, that when you start, your protagonist is kind of a placeholder, and they see things in your point of view, but you often don't get them until late in the game. You might get some incredibly important piece of information that you wouldn't have known if you had just been daydreaming it. But as you're working and as you're asking yourself questions, as you're doing the 3D character study, we've talked about that from The Art of Dramatic Writing by Lagos Egri, the best character study. I have at least one video that's just about character. I think it's the first one that I did, was about, because that's how you start. You start with character, and everything comes out of character because they're aligned a certain way. They have their contradictions, they have their weaknesses, they have their flaws, and then you put pressure on that person to match the flaws. And then you see the cracks and you see how they have to shift and dump some of their qualities and get other ones to be able to meet the occasion. Um, GB says, it's true about the antagonist shows up first and strongest. That happened in a pipeline script I wrote. Does the antagonist show up first? Not necessarily, but you'll find an antagonist who is right for your protagonist that will put pressure. There are a lot of characters in the Russian novels who are they're both friendly and foe, and they go back and forth. And they pull the character in different directions. So it's like a young tree that gets pulled back and forth, and if it doesn't actually tear break the little sapling, it actually strengthens the tree. It's very funny. My husband's father, they lived in a neighborhood where there was this there was in Canada where there was this Russian guy who lived on the block, and he would go out and shake. They had those little trees, like a new suburb, those little trees. And this one guy, he would go out and he would shake his tree violently, like every day. And everybody thought he was nuts. He says it'll help it grow. And years later, we went on to that street just as, my husband wanted to show me where he grew up. And that one tree is twice the size of the other trees. So your forces that pull on your character actually strengthen them. Here we go. Bozena says, work, work, work. Too true. Yeah. Sarah Leslie says, I wonder how different the protagonist starts out as a placeholder thing is for omniscient books with multiple narrators, something I've never attempted. All of your characters are basically placeholders as you begin with them. And the further you go, the more scenes that they've been through, the more accurate you're getting. And that's why you get to the end of the first draft, and then you immediately go back and you begin to rework, because the character that you started with is wrong. There's all kinds of stuff wrong with them that you've discovered as you go along. And generally, everybody's different on this, but I want to get to the end of the draft before I go back and fix anything. I mean, yesterday's stuff I'll go back and work, but I won't go back 10 chapters and change the character to match what they're now doing. They have to be capable of doing what it is they're doing now. But I'll do that on second draft. I'll go back and go. That's why you don't have to place that much importance on wherever you decided to start it and however you decided to start it, because you will go back and change it, because you know so much more. You know where they started. You know so much more about their crankiness and their superstitions and their hopes and their pleasures, and it just keeps going around. So GB says this is a loaded series of gems you just shared with us, the cracks, the pressure, etc. I'm going to watch this at least 10 times more. Thank you. And Hope, hi Hope, good to see you. So in the ending, you have to fight your way to the ending. I tend to rewrite the ending over and over. It's almost like making a bed. I'm not good at beds. Beds are my, you know, if anybody has read me, there's several beds in different books. I know in Chimes, I think it's Chimes of Lost Cathedral. Um, yeah, where my character is working in a boarding house, and she cannot make the beds. Every time she tries to, do that thing where you shake the sheet and it billows out and then falls so beautifully on the bed. I've seen people do this all my life. I cannot do it. I do that and it just I cannot do it. But endings are like that. You have to do them over and over and over until they lie correctly, until they uh, ring the gong, the big gong that comes back through. I mean, when I did the very end of the Russian novel, Chimes of the Lost Cathedral, when I got to the very end, um, there's an interesting book by the painter Kandinsky, Vasily Kandinsky, and I think it's in Point, Line, and Plane. He wrote two important books, very, very small, like pamphlets. I urge everybody to read it. Um, there's two. There's one concerning the spiritual in art. He was an abstract artist, and the other was Point, Line, and Plane. And I believe it's Point, Line, and Plane, where he says the energy of a line builds as it approaches the frame, but as soon as it touches the frame, all the energy goes out of the line. So when I was working on the ending of Chimes of Lost Cathedral, I got you like here. And then you can make the jump, the synaptic jump, in that last bit. In Painted Black, it was completing a circuit that the girl was unable to help her boyfriend ultimately, but she's able to help somebody else. The saving of that person is an ending that worked on that book. And the final book, the White Oleander jumped ahead, and you saw where she ends up, and still not quite complete with everything that's happened to her, even years later. Um, Yeah, Cedric's mom looking for the bed quagmire. Yeah, I don't know if anybody else has trouble making the bed. It's my least favorite thing in the world. Um, I'd rather scrub toilets than make a bed. Yeah, the Point, Line, Plane by Kandinsky. There's certain art books that I just find really valuable, kind of metaphorically. They're about art, but I can see the application for writing. One is called The Art Spirit by Robert Henri, Henri, and the Kandinsky books are another. I get so much out of them. Bozena says, I'll have to read Marina again, starting to miss the characters so much. Yeah, I miss them too. So anyway, we're coming to the end of another Writing Wednesday. But so Demi, I'd say go and start writing. Start at the start and see where the scenes go. Keep them one time, one place. Something happens that you can't go back to the way it was, and you will start your book and give it a start. Um, you might you might end up wanting just to write a short story. It might not end up being a novel, but if it is, if you have a full novel's worth of stuff that you want to write, just start. You can start anywhere really, and you'll end up in the same place, because this is the story that interests you. Um, let's see, Princess 2D, D2E. What do you recommend for people who can't stop outlining and get discouraged before even starting? Yeah, this the subject of this is exactly what I would recommend is forget your outline. You cannot do it in your head. You cannot do it in your head. You have to do it on the page in live scenes. And if you have an outline, pick any of the scenes that you have in your outline, any of them, and start whatever you can see most clearly. Write that scene and have something happen that cannot go back the way it was. And it might kick you into the next scene, or you can throw it in a box and pick another scene that you can see really clearly and write that and put in a box. Um, but often that scene will generate the next scene. And get it out of the outline, get it, unless you're writing a mystery, unless you're writing genre, in which case, you have to know where the murders and where the red herrings are going to be and all that. And this was a question that somebody had up above. I'm going to look for it now. About Sarah Leslie says, genre conventions may also help depending on the genre. Yeah, starting the lords and the ladies and the castle and then the quest, or somebody below decks in the kitchen, wanting to be a knight and then giving opportunities. So the genres do help. The detective novel, the mysterious woman comes into the office and she can't find her husband, and off you go. Whereas in literary fiction, it's the character themselves carries the plot within them. So GB says, Hope says perfection is the enemy of the good. Yeah, absolutely. And there is no such thing as perfection in the physical world. Once you get it out of your head and onto the page, it will no longer be perfect. So forget it. Forget it. It's not perfect. And we're not interested in perfection. In interpretive arts, if you are a concert pianist in Painted Black, I have, the mother says there's no place for a good enough concert pianist. There are too many geniuses because it's an interpretive art form. The composer does the creative work, and then the pianist or the musician or the dancer in classical ballet, they don't create the work. They do their best to interpret or not even interpret, but deliver as faithful a copy or a faithful rendition as their talent can possibly allow them to do. Whereas creative arts are full of flaws. They're full of weird shit that, plots that start here and end up who knows where. And that's interesting. We're interested in that. AI can do a perfect something. And bored. Am I already bored? Yeah. Because it's just a really good plagiarizing machine. It won't have anything new. Whereas the new stuff is rambling, it's accidental, it's strange things go into it. And that's why it's exciting. It's as exciting to read as it is to write. Yeah, throw that slop down and fix it later. I'm afraid that's and it won't be not necessarily slop. Sometimes the angels sing and you get a stretch where you just can't lose. But my writing teacher used to say, Kate Braverman used to say, there's no such thing as a permanent state of grace. So eventually you're going to be shitty. You might be really golden today, but you'll be shitty tomorrow. So don't sweat it. Just figure, oh, that's part of it. Okay, so good luck. Jump in, write a scene, write another scene. Oh, Linda, sorry. It's been a while since I've seen you. How old were you when you started writing on a daily basis with the intent of telling stories? I was 21. 21. Okay. Well, thank you for coming, and I wish you good writing. And subscribe if you haven't subscribed, it helps me. And we'll see you next time. So good writing.